All right, buckle up because we are diving headfirst into the world of salsa piano.
Oh yeah, and we're going deep, unpacking the secrets behind its infectious rhythm, with a little help from Hector Martignon and his book Salsa in a Nutshell.
This guy, he's the real deal, a true maestro, and he doesn't shy away from the big questions like, where did salsa actually come from?
Because it's not exactly a simple answer, is it?
Not at all. Martignon lays out two main camps on this. One says Afro-Cuban music is the heart and soul of salsa, while the other points to its evolution outside Cuba, especially in New York after the revolution.
And he does a great job of showing how both sides played a part in shaping the genre we know and love.
It's like two sides of the same coin, both essential to the whole.
It's that fusion of Afro-Cuban roots with the energy and innovation of New York and Puerto Rico that makes salsa so unique.
And it wasn't just a one-way street either, was it? I mean, you had New York bands heading down to Cuba, soaking up the rhythms, and then bringing those influences back with them.
Exactly. It was this constant exchange, this musical conversation happening between these cultural hubs that really fueled salsa's evolution.
And speaking of evolution, it's fascinating. The connection Martignon draws between salsa and New Orleans jazz. I mean, talk about two genres that, on the surface, seem worlds apart.
Right, but when you dig a little deeper, you see these amazing parallels, not just in the instruments they share, the trumpets, the bass, but also that emphasis on improvisation, that spontaneous energy between musicians.
It's like this hidden musical thread connecting these seemingly disparate genres across continents.
It really makes you think about the global language of music.
It does. But getting back to salsa's story, we can't ignore the impact of the Cuban Revolution. It was a turning point, forcing musicians to adapt and innovate in ways they never imagined.
Absolutely. Some fled Cuba, taking their music to new corners of the world, while others stayed, finding creative ways to keep their musical heritage alive, despite the restrictions.
Can you imagine the ingenuity it took for these artists to not only preserve their music, but to help it evolve into something new and vibrant in the face of such upheaval?
Martignon actually touches on a less glamorous side of this musical evolution, too, a side that often gets overlooked.
Oh, right. He talks about how some Cuban hits were recorded during this time without giving proper credit to the original artists.
It's a reminder that the spread of music, especially during times of political and social change, isn't always a straightforward or, ethical process.
Definitely food for thought, and it highlights the importance of acknowledging and honoring the roots of musical genres, understanding the complexities, the power dynamics at play. But speaking of roots, how did the piano, an instrument we often associate with classical music or jazz, find its way into this percussion-driven world of salsa?
Well, to understand that, we have to go back and appreciate the prominence of another instrument in Cuban music, the trees.
Ah, yes, the trees. For those who haven't had the pleasure, picture a Cuban guitar with a sound all its own.
Martignon calls it the heartthrob of Cuban sun bands. And of course, sun being one of the key ingredients in the salsa recipe.
Exactly, and for a long time, the tres reigned supreme. But as with all art forms, things change, they evolve.
And that's where the piano makes its grand entrance.
It wasn't an immediate takeover, though, was it?
Not at all. At first, the piano in salsa was playing it safe, almost mimicking the tres. But slowly, pianists started to experiment, to find their own voice within the music, pushing the boundaries of what the instrument could do.
And one name that stands out in this evolution of salsa piano is the legendary Arsenio Rodriguez.
This guy, Arsenio, he was a visionary, a true innovator. I mean, he was a trace player himself, but he could see the potential of the piano to add a whole new dimension to the music.
It's like he saw a kindred spirit in the piano, even though it was coming from a completely different world.
Exactly. And adding a piano to his band, it wasn't just about expanding the sound, it was like injecting a new personality into the mix.
And once that door was open, pianists like Lino Frias and Ruben Gonzalez came bursting through with their own unique style.
Absolutely. They weren't content to simply imitate the trees. They wanted to see what the piano could really do within the rhythmic landscape of salsa.
I can only imagine those early jam sessions, those first moments of experimentation where the piano found its footing as a lead voice in salsa. But, speaking of finding your footing, we've got to talk about the rhythmic foundation of it all, the clave.
The clave. Martignon calls it the code of salsa. And honestly, that's such a perfect description. It's like the heartbeat, the guiding principle, the DNA of the music.
It's funny, before I dove into this book, I knew clave was important, but I didn't realize just how deeply it ran through every single aspect of salsa.
And it really does. It's the thread that connects everything, how the instruments interact, how the dancers move their feet, Everything revolves around it.
It's like the secret language that everyone's in on.
And what's even more fascinating is the historical depth of the clave. Martignon talks about the theory that the instrument itself, those two wooden sticks, might have originated from a much darker time in history.
Right. He talks about the possibility of those rhythms coming from the clavos, the nails used on slave ships. It's pretty powerful when you think about it.
Absolutely. It's almost as if those rhythms, born out of unimaginable hardship, became a way for enslaved Africans to hold on to their heritage, to find strength and community.
It gives me chills. It really makes you appreciate the resilience of music, the way it can flourish, even in the darkest of times. But, we keep saying clave as if it's just one thing, but it's not, is it? Martignon talks about different types of clave, each with its own distinct flavor.
He breaks it down into two main types, sun clave and rumba clave. You can definitely hear the difference. Sun clave has a very grounded, elegant feel to it, almost like a waltz, but with that Latin swing.
It makes you want to just glide across the dance floor.
Rumba clave, on the other hand, that's where things get a little more playful, a little more mischievous. It's all about those syncopated rhythms, those unexpected accents that keep you guessing.
So when I'm listening to salsa, how can I tell which one I'm hearing? Is there a trick to it?
It's all about paying attention to the spacing of those beats. Sun clave is more symmetrical, predictable in a way. Rumba clave is going to keep you on your toes, always a little bit off kilter. It's that subtle shift in emphasis that makes all the difference.
So if my hips are swaying to the beat, I'm probably hearing sun clave. But if I find myself wanting to move a little more, well, that's probably the rumba clave working its magic.
Exactly. You're picking it up already.
Yeah.
But the clave, as essential as it is, it's just one piece of the puzzle. We can't forget about all the other instruments adding their own voices to the mix. We've got congas, timbales, all those iconic salsa sounds.
And Martignon does a fantastic job of bringing those instruments to life through his descriptions. He talks about how the congas are rubbed to create that deep, resonant tone, while the timbales are hammered for a sharp, piercing sound.
You can practically hear those instruments coming alive as you're reading.
And then, of course, there's the bass, the heart and soul of any good salsa band.
Oh, the bass in salsa. It's a whole other beast. It doesn't always behave the way you'd expect.
Yeah, it's intentionally trying to trip you up, but in the best way possible.
What's interesting is that it often doesn't land on the downbeat like you'd expect. It kind of dances around the clave, creating this amazing rhythmic tension that keeps you guessing.
It's that unpredictable element that adds a whole other layer of excitement to the music. But there's one more layer of complexity we've got to unpack here, this whole 3-2 versus 2-3 clave structure.
Right, and this is where it gets a little technical for musicians, but it doesn't have to be overwhelming for listeners. Think of it this way. The clave pattern is like a phrase with two parts. In 3-2 clave, you've got 3 beats in the first part and 2 in the second.
So it's like taking 3 steps forward and then 2 steps back.
Exactly. And then 2-3 clave is the opposite. You're taking 2 steps forward and then 3 steps back. It creates a different kind of rhythmic feel.
It's like a musical call and response, each with its own unique rhythm.
And the amazing thing is, musicians can switch between these structures within a song, seamlessly changing the mood and energy of the music without ever losing that core essence of the clave.
Yeah, it's like the secret handshake between the musicians, and once you're in on it, you hear the music in a whole new way.
And the cool thing is, these shifts, they're not random. They often reflect different regional styles within salsa.
Oh, really? Tell me more about that.
Well, Martignon points out how Cuban musicians tend to be more fluid, more conversational in how they move between these clave structures, whereas New Yorkers often hit those accents harder, making the transitions more pronounced.
So it's like 2 different dialects of the same language, both speaking to that core salsa rhythm, but with their own unique flavor.
Exactly. And what's remarkable is that even when you don't hear those clave sticks constantly tapping, that rhythmic framework, that conversation is always happening beneath the surface.
It's like that saying, once you hear it, you can't unhear it. After this deep dive, I know I'm going to be listening to salsa with a whole new set of ears.
Me too. And you know what I really appreciate about Martignon's book? He doesn't just bog you down with technical terms and theory. He really wants you to feel the music.
Exactly. He gives you the tools to unlock that deeper level of appreciation for salsa. And once you have those tools, well, it's like a whole new world opens up.
So the next time you find yourself on the dance floor or even just listening at home, see if you can pick out that clave, that rhythmic conversation happening beneath it all.
Can you feel that pulse, that heartbeat driving the music? That's the magic of salsa, and now you're in on the secret.
It's like a whole new world of musical understanding opens up.
It really does. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive into the world of salsa piano.
But hey, this is just the beginning. There's a whole lot more to explore.
There really is. Until next time, keep those ears open, keep those feet moving, and most importantly, keep that salsa spirit alive.